All right, hello, welcome back. This should be our second virtual ELA lesson together. So, today is going to have some things that are similar to the last lesson. We're going to do some things a little differently, but some of the rules still apply. So, when I annotate something, you annotate something. That is what I will be looking for when I grade your classwork. If I stop and tell you to do something like answer this question or do this, you need to do that. That's what I will be looking for, again, when I grade your classwork. If we choose to just watch the video and not be active participants in the lesson, that will affect our class grade. So this is me giving you that direct instruction right now. We're going to, again, go over your do now, which you've already done. We're going to start the guided practice, go through the guided practice together, and then I will review your independent practice and exit ticket that you're going to be doing after when we have our Q&A session. So I need everybody to be open to the 4-9 classwork. That's today's date, 4-9. While you are opening that, I am going to be sharing my screen with you so we can all see the 4-9 classwork on my screen as well. And I will give you a second to get there. As you are getting there, I'm going to type my answer for my do now. So I will do that as you open up the 4-9 classwork. Everybody should be at 4-9 classwork now. So I'm going to move on in 3, 2, 1. Let's review your do now, which was a question about your personal life. So everybody's going to have a different answer because everybody's had different lives. What different groups of people have you been a part of in your life? Some examples might be family, church, clubs. So I said, I've been in a writing club in college. That's a group of teachers at Achievers, and my family that I grew up with. So these are all different groups that I've been a part of, right? So that answer is short and sweet because the question is short and sweet. Look at our objective for today. Our objective is students will be able to identify and use evidence to support how group behaviors influence human behavior. So how does the way a group works and a group behaves influence how you or an individual person, one person, behaves? Okay, so looking at our directions for our guided practice, which is what we are going to be now moving into, the directions say, read and annotate the article for ways in which being a part of a group influence humans' behavior. Okay, so read the article and annotate for ways in which being part of a big old group changed or affected different people's behavior. So that is what the information we'll be looking for. So I'm going to start reading the article with you. Again, we are annotating for purpose now, so we're annotating for specific things. So I will stop when I find something that I think we need to annotate, and I will say you need to annotate this. Otherwise, let's begin. Group behavior. The word social means relating to society or its organization. There is a special type of science that studies how human beings interact with each other, and it is called sociology. One quality of our society that sociologists, the type of scientists who study society, have looked closely at is mankind's desire to be a part of different groups. Sociologists call this group behavior. Okay, so I'm looking at this article. I don't see much. If we remember, our purpose is to annotate for the article in ways being a part of a group influence human behaviors. And this article, this paragraph is not typically, it's not generally telling me any of that information. It's not giving me any of those specific reasons. So I think we're safe to move on to the next paragraph. Sociologists believe that group behavior began in mankind a long time ago when man was more primitive. Back then, people did not have big homes made of concrete or brick to protect them from dangerous animals. People slept in caves and were out in the open during the day a lot more. They would look all around for food so that the species would continue living. Eventually, people began to realize that if they traveled and worked together, they could find more food and would be more effective and be able to more effectively battle animals that threaten them. Bigger quantities of food and a better sense of safety helps humans survive and prosper. Okay, so now we're looking at something. I look at this and I think back to my purpose. My purpose is to annotate for ways that being in groups affected people's behaviors. So people began to realize that if they traveled and worked together in a group, they could find more food and would be able to more effectively battle animals that threaten them. So I'm going to highlight that, press the plus sign over here, and make an annotation. People decided they would rather be in groups to be safer from animals. I'm gonna give you a second to write that down, and as you do, I'm just gonna talk about that a little bit. So you have a group, you have a bunch of individual people, right? So just like everybody's on their own and they're being hurt when they're going out hunting for these big animals. But then they say, well, what if we all work together? And so that being in a group changed the way they thought, right? Because they thought, okay, let's all be together, work together as a group. So we are going to move on in 3, 2, 1. Okay. As time went on, people began to see the benefits of being part of a group. Groups provide companionship. People simply get to be around other people, which we as a species began to enjoy. Usually, this sense of companionship would be stronger felt if the group as a whole had a common purpose. This could also lead to members of a group feeling extra proud of themselves when they accomplish something, especially if it benefits the rest of the group. Some people also began to become leaders within their groups, which create a higher level of appreciation and respect for them from their peers. This marked the beginning of roles within a group. Now, I want to think about roles, but the next paragraph actually defines the word, so let's just move on and then we'll make an annotation. A role is another word for a job within a group. Individuals in a group either naturally create a purpose for themselves or might have been given one by the group's leader. Some men of a group had the role of hunter, for example. Others may have been the builders of campfires. So let's think about this. These whole 2 paragraphs talk about roles, but let's just focus on this one where it tells us role is another word for job within a group, and I want to make an annotation for that. And I'm going to say people began to make jobs for themselves within the groups. And so if the people these people only had the jobs once they created the groups, right? So that means they wouldn't have had the jobs unless they were in the groups. So people began to make jobs for themselves within the groups, which they wouldn't have had without the groups. I'll give you a second to get that annotation down. Okay, so moving on in 3, 2, 1. So we're seeing another way that people have changed by being in these groups. Let's move on a little bit. Group behavior also include the creation of norms and values. Norms are examples of what a group normally does over a period of time. Members of a group might all wake up at the same time and begin to carry out their various duties during the day, but repeat those same activities day after day. Values are a summary of what the group's goals might be or a general idea of what is acceptable behavior. Some groups might strongly believe in honesty and dislike theft. So again, highlight that. Let's talk about norms and values. So norms are what they do every single day. Values is like what's important to them. And so I want to say humans would not have had norms and values without being in groups. And so you need to annotate for that as well. So like think about like some values that are in groups that you belong to, you know, your family might value honesty, telling them the truth. They might value you helping them with the chores, so hard work. They might value you doing activities with them and being kind to them. So you might not have some of those values if you weren't part of that group. So that group is what's creating those values and changing the way humans behave and think. We'll move on to the next paragraph. There are actually some negative things that can come along with group behavior. From time to time, if a person is not accepted within a group, they might feel rejected and saddened. Other times, a group might find itself a common enemy, which is another group that is disliked as a whole because it may have different norms and values. Group behavior also makes it more likely that all of the members of a group will believe something just because one member says so, even if it's not true or favorable. I'd like you to pick out a piece of information from this paragraph and talk about how group behavior affects human behavior, how groups affect individual people. So you pick what piece of evidence you want to use from here, and then you make an annotation on the side. I'm going to give you a minute to do that. Okay, moving on in 3, 2, 1. Last paragraph, I believe. Yes. Group behavior is the basis for so much of what we see in our society today. Cities, towns, and countries were built up because of a group behavior that created common values. The same can be said for all of the large organized religions of the world, not to mention little after-school clubs that focus on art or the game of chess. Okay. So to come full circle, because I was talking about clubs at school in the beginning of the lesson. So take a second, do the same thing we did for the last one. I'd like you to take a piece of evidence out of here and make your own annotation on the side here of how group behavior affects human behavior. Okay, moving on. 3, 2, 1. That is our guided practice today. Again, we annotate for purpose. Look, our purpose was, of course, using evidence to support how group behaviors influence human behaviors. Taking a preview at your independent practice, you have 3 questions. The first one is asking you to directly asking you a question about the article, asking you to provide evidence. Number 2 is asking you what norms and values are, which we've already been over, but you're going to have to give me a definition according to the text, and then answer the second part, which is more asking you about your norms and values. Third question is asking you a question with a direct right or wrong answer, and you need to use the text to give me that correct answer. Your exit ticket, moving on. What is the author's claim in this article? What is the point the author is trying to make, which I have in there? What are they trying to say about human behavior from the past and how it affects us today? Okay. Use evidence from the text in a paragraph response. So, was the author trying to prove to us? And how are they proving it to us? In a paragraph response, you know you always do at least 4 sentences. You have a topic statement. You're using evidence, you're explaining that evidence. You guys know by now what a paragraph should look like, and I expect to see that when I go to grade this. All right, I don't want to see a sentence. I don't want to see a sentence and then just evidence. I need a paragraph because I know you guys can do it. All right. Otherwise, that is our lesson for today. We're going to move on to the Q&A session where you can ask me some questions or get started on your independent practice. So I will see you guys in a second. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and end the video. See you guys in a second.